Morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar for UKRI Translation AHRC Proof of Concept. My name is Leo Springate, and I am Head of Funding Operations here at the AHRC. It's wonderful to see so many of you today. I just want to do a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. So as you can probably see, we've got British Sign Language interpreters joining us today. These are Ruth, who's currently on screen with me now, and Chloe, and they will be pinned throughout so that they're visible to all. Do feel free to adjust your settings so you can resize elements of the screen to best suit your needs. And you can also turn on closed captions should you wish, should you find those helpful. We're hoping to be with you for about an hour today. Jaideep will begin with the context and aims of the opportunity. We'll then have some remarks from Ruth, followed by a presentation on the opportunity detail itself from Paris, and then there'll be time for those all-important questions at the end. If you want to submit a question today, please use the Q&A function. We have a group of colleagues behind the scenes collating these, and we'll do our very best to answer as many as we can. People always want to know whether the recording will be available afterwards, so you can kind of enjoy it again for a second time at your leisure. So we are recording this webinar, and you'll be able to find it on the Funding Finder page for the opportunity alongside the slides that we're going to cover today. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Dr. Jaideep Gupte.
Excellent. Thank you, Leo, and good morning, everyone. My name is Jaideep Gupte. I'm Director of Research at the AHRC. Delighted to welcome you to this Applicant webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time, and it is indeed great to see so many people here today. As Leo mentioned, over the next hour, we'll walk you through the thinking behind this opportunity, explain the context of change, the aims of the opportunity, and how it fits into that wider landscape for UKRI in terms of translation and impact. So what I'd like to begin on this slide is to briefly talk you through the journey we've been on over the past few years to strengthen and modernize AHRC's support for responsive applicant-led research and how that connects to the wider UKRI translation and commercialization landscape. So putting the needle back quite a ways, the work began in 2022 when AHRC committed to transforming our responsive mode, what we now call applicant-led mode. And our aims throughout this have been quite clear. What we wanted to do was to create funding routes that are easier to navigate, more flexible, accessible, but also those that are better in supporting the diversity of discovery-led research across the arts and humanities. We wanted to strengthen progression for ideas and researchers, clearer pathways from those early explorations through to larger, more ambitious projects that reflect the true scale, cost of excellent research. Importantly for us, we wanted to ensure that these routes are open to emerging researchers, new voices, non-traditional talent, and that the next generation of arts and humanities researchers can continue to flourish. So a major milestone came in 2023 when we launched Curiosity and Catalyst. Those were the first steps in reshaping how researchers access early stage, mid-stage support for their ideas. At the same time, we made changes to our research grants opportunity, including increasing the funding limits so that more ambitious projects could be supported. In that same year, we made decisions to pause follow-on funding. We did that quite deliberately so that we could step back and commission an independent external evaluation. That evaluation produced a robust report on the scheme's performance and impact, along with a set of recommendations for the future. And those recommendations have been extremely valuable in helping us redesign AHRC's approach to translation. We're ensuring that we retain what worked well in follow-on, in the FOF scheme, while aligning the opportunity with the new UKRI-wide direction on translation and commercialization. In October 2025, so last year, Paris shared an update with the community through her blog on evaluating on how the FOF was evolving to realize these new possibilities. And I thought that blog summarized the evaluation findings extremely well and reflected on the very real value that follow-on funding has delivered for the arts and humanities community. But it also set out why the opportunity needed to evolve, to reflect today's research landscape, the ways in which research increasingly moves into the world beyond academia. And that brings us to January of this year, when we reached an important milestone with the launch of AHRC Proof of Concept, which now fully replaces FOF. Now, although the name has changed, the purpose remains deeply rooted in what FOF funding has been for the community and why it's been so valuable. So what has changed is the clarity and ambition around translation, right? Under UKRI's mission to advance knowledge, improve lives and livelihoods, and drive sustainable economic growth, proof of concept is now positioned as a key mechanism for translating the extraordinary discovery-led research emerging from the arts and humanities into real-world outcomes. At its heart, the opportunity is about enabling research to move from ideas into action, creating new partnerships, new services, products, insights, and practices that make that meaningful difference across society and economy. On the next slide, thank you. Let me just briefly highlight what the evaluation of FOF told us and how it shaped the design of this opportunity. So first, the evaluation confirmed something many of us already suspected, that follow-on funding has been a highly effective and valued scheme. Now that evidence is really quite striking, right? So between 2015 and 2024, FOF projects generated quite near 200 million in additional funding. So that's really strong leverage, and around 20% of FOF funding awards were cited in REF 2021 as impact case studies. Clearly a demonstrable real-world influence being showcased there. So this scheme that has delivered genuine impact across the arts and humanities is the sort of clear, very decisive evidence we got from the evaluation. But the evaluation also highlighted untapped potential. It suggested that there are opportunities to strengthen economic and commercial pathways to support bolder forms of translation, including venture creation, including new forms of collaboration with business and other sectors. So in other words, FOF funding was working really well, but it could do more. So our aim with the proof of concept has been to build on those strengths while updating the opportunity so it aligns with the current research and innovation landscape. Now that includes aligning with UKRI's wider strategy on translation and commercialization, as I said, but also ensuring the scheme supports projects capable of delivering transformational and measurable outcomes, now be they cultural, societal, policy-focused, or economic. For applicants, I think this means clearer expectations around impact pathways and translation activity. But I think it also means a modernized route more generally for the arts and humanities to unlock new possibilities and demonstrate that full breadth of impact across the work that is being done. On the next slide, just a moment to explain the change in naming, because many of you will understandably be wondering why the term proof of concept is being used. So across UKRI, there's been significant feedback from the research community, and many of us here today will recognize this as a genuine issue, that the landscape of translation and commercialization funding has become too complex, perhaps too fragmented. So UKRI has streamlined that system, simplifying translation funding into 4 core program models. So those are the translation collaborative R&D, impact acceleration, supporting engagement, knowledge exchange, early transition, proof of concept, the topic of today, which develops early ideas into those viable products, processes, services, and entrepreneurial schemes, including the new UKRI Enterprise Fellowships, designed to build researchers' confidence, their skills. Now, the aim of this framework is simple: to reduce, to sort of replace that patchwork of legacy schemes into a clearer, easier to navigate system. Now, importantly, although overall the framework is simplified, individual councils, including AHRC, still retain that flexibility to design opportunities that reflect the needs of our disciplines, our communities. So while the terminology is shared across UKRI, the spirit, the scope of the opportunity remains very much grounded in the arts and humanities. And proof of concept does not narrow what counts as impactful research, right? For us, translation continues to mean many things. It can mean shaping public policy. It can mean influencing professional practice. It could mean strengthening cultural institutions and communities, certainly enriching public understanding, creative life. And yes, sometimes it may involve commercialization or venture creation. What matters here, and I really want to underscore this, is that research travels into the world beyond academia and leads to tangible outcomes. Economic outcomes are one pathway of this. They're not the only one, right? Nor the only measures of success. In the next slide, thanks. Just briefly to outline the aims of this refreshed opportunity. So proof of concept supports ambitious arts and humanities projects that deliver measurable real-world change. We want to move beyond activity for its own sake, right? Focusing on outcomes that genuinely improve understanding, practice, communities, lived experience. Second, the opportunity is intentionally flexible. Impact pathways are rarely linear. Research evolves in unexpected ways. We absolutely heard this through the evidence we got in the evaluation as well. So projects may involve pivoting research into new contexts, building new collaborations, scaling impact work, or exploring early stage commercialization. We want to give researchers the space to experiment with those possibilities. Third, we want to strengthen the excellent traditions of co-design, co-development, partnership working that have been and will continue to be such a hallmark of arts and humanities research, right? These approaches have ensured that outcomes we produce are not only innovative, but they're also meaningful, but they're also sustainable for the communities and organizations we work with. Fourth, we want to enable a wide range of impact pathways. Now, this includes working with business, as I alluded to earlier, also the heritage sector, policymakers, voluntary organizations, community groups, the wider public. Arts and humanities research contributes in all of those directions, and this opportunity is really designed to support that diversity. And finally, really want to recognize and champion the role of the arts and humanities in contributing to economic growth and wider government priorities, not by reducing the diversity of arts and humanities discipline into some single form of impact, but really by making visible the distinct economic, the distinct cultural, societal value that arts and humanities research brings. So in essence, proof of concept is about enabling that ambitious, flexible, collaborative project that translates excellent research into meaningful change in the world. I hope that's been helpful. And with that, I'm delighted to hand over to Professor Ruth Livesey. Ruth's a member of our AHRC's advisory board. And Ruth, if you could share some reflections from the board's perspective and your own perspective on the significance of proof of concept.
Thanks so much, Jaideep, and really warm welcome to everyone who's joined us here this morning. It's great to know so many people across the arts and humanities community, and our partners, without whom this work couldn't happen, are here today to find more out about this scheme. So I'm Professor Ruth Livesey. I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at Royal Holloway, University of London. I'm also a Professor of 19th Century Literature and Thought. But I'm here today primarily in my role as a member of the AHRC Advisory Board. And I joined the board just under a year ago now, actually. And one of the first opportunities I had to get quite hands-on with that work was the review of follow-on funding, the report, and then a really deep consideration of the lessons learned from what, as Jaideep's pointed out, has been a really significant scheme in the past for AHRC, but the world has changed and the funding landscape around us has changed slightly as well. So what more do we need? How do we listen to people who are eager to do this kind of work? And a couple of the changes we can see embodied in this scheme, I think, really relate to that feedback that's really evident in the commissioned report as well. So a couple of things to pull out from there was absolutely the diversity and many, many pathways to impact and distinctive outcomes that came from follow-on funding. And the work generally with partners. There was always some distinct feedback about eligibility for this scheme, and obviously that has changed slightly in this revised version, but it is about building and scaling what the Arts and Humanities Research Council has already funded, as we'll hear about in a bit more detail shortly. But also things about duration, partnership, and focus for the awards. So as Jaideep said, we want, there are plural pathways here, and that was strong feedback from the advisory board. But also a little more sharpness in that delivery of outcomes. And I hope that will be helpful for applicants. Because I think across the whole of the arts humanities research community, taking on your first project as PI, and I will speak from experience in relation to this in a moment, is a door opening onto whole new ways of working, particularly with the partners you meet along the way as a project gains its scope and ground, and you see new opportunities to take the value of your research out to a wider community. So for those of us who are PIs when the follow-on funding scheme was available, just that awareness you could start a conversation that might have a longer future was a very powerful thing to have behind you. And speaking from experience, I think for me, I had some follow-on funding in 2020 after having had an Arts and Humanities Research Fellowship a couple of years before. And it just enabled me to realise the value of my own work in a really, really different way. And reflectively to think about the skills I had and how they were valued beyond being a university seminar rooms and libraries and archives. So it was a huge learning experience for me, which I'm very grateful for the partners I work with across local heritage organisations and arts organisations in the Midlands in particular at that point in time. So there is something about our wider arts and humanities community and how we can learn to understand what our skills bring to wider communities through follow-on funding. And that's a long-term relationship, often understanding where needs are in communities we haven't necessarily engaged with or spoken to in detail in the past, and reshaping how we talk about our research to meet those needs and what we realize can be delivered from that work as well. And it's genuinely exciting, I think, in the challenging global context we're in, to absolutely understand that what we do as arts and humanities researchers can be transformative. And sometimes to see that really direct, much more direct, it's never one pathway to impact. We can never foreclose it. But there is absolutely that sense that you can see a way in which something that felt like perhaps quite an individual set of questions in some PI-led projects can evoke a wave of change over time. And I do think, although the nomenclature of this, the proof of concept language, the translation, as Jaideep alluded to, can feel a little bit unfamiliar to those of us from the arts and humanities research community, it's, to me, in my day job, massively important that we as arts and humanities researchers are part of a wider conversation, because if we don't learn to use some of this language in talking about the work we do and how it changes the world, and show some evidence of that how, there is a vulnerability to ensuring that we get a sustainable sense of funding long term for our work in this area. So I think there are many of us who are absolutely passionate about the fact that the arts and humanities work is transformative, but we haven't always been perhaps as creative and disciplined as we might be in assembling that as a body of evidence. And so something like this scheme gives us a very powerful lever as institutions, as individuals, as the Arts and Humanities Research Council, to show why funding arts and humanities research matters, perhaps in a more direct input to output line than we've been used to as a community. But I think this is an entirely positive way to learn to speak a little bit of that language. And so I do think the breadth and flexibility of this scheme is really, really core to it. As an advisory board, we were really clear that we wanted to absolutely keep at the heart of this scheme the sense, as Jaideep said, that there are many and varied routes to impact. They are social, they are cultural, they can be about institutions, they can be about economic growth and commercialisation as well. And that's the exciting piece. That's a quite big step for many in the arts and humanities research community, but to name it in this scheme opens that door to think, what if my project with this museum working on this app, or or this social intervention using my methods from my home discipline, can be really valued by a community to achieve social change and benefits to health through partnership, and that has a thing that can be taken to market. It's really new territory for us, but I really welcome this scheme calling that out as somewhere that we could experiment and grow as a community of practitioners and researchers. And I also really welcome this scheme as a means to create new pathways and collaborations. I think in most cases, in the past, and I imagine in the future of proof of concept, it does take academics outside the university to think in new, equitable ways of collaboration with partners, understanding their needs, understanding what the market might need, understanding what an institution might need, or a community of those socially challenged that you can work with for positive impact. And so it is about methodologies of equitable collaboration and impact to change lives and futures. So really, I suppose the timing of this for me feels very key as well. I think, as we all know, it's not easy times for arts and humanities research in universities across the UK, indeed globally, not just in the UK. These are challenging times. But as I say, as the world changes, our ability as a community of researchers and practitioners to grow and respond to those changing needs, to develop new skills, to create new partnerships, has to be part of that resilient response, that we're not in defensive mode as arts and humanities researchers. We know the world needs our kind of work more than ever. And schemes like this help us create that engagement where we can see that need, we can respond to it, and there is resource and support for us to do that in really meaningful ways with long-term impact. So yeah, I very much look forward to seeing the work that emerges from this new scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Hi, everybody. I'm Seager. I'm a Senior Investment Manager here at AHRC, and I'm here today to talk you through an overview of UKRI Translation AHRC Proof of Concept funding opportunity. So without further ado, I will get into that. So I wanted to start with taking you through the basics. This opportunity supports arts and humanities researchers to translate previously funded AHRC or UKRI projects into real-life impact. That could be, as we've heard, economic impact, societal benefit, cultural value, influence on policy, or any of the above. The emphasis here is on helping existing research to take that crucial next step. So the UKRI Translation AHRC Proof of Concept opportunity sits within AHRC's applicant-led mode, which many of you may know as responsive mode previously. This means that the opportunity is designed to be flexible, driven by the research community, and open to a wide range of project types and impacts. Importantly, it's an always open opportunity, giving applicants the freedom to apply for their project when their project is genuinely ready to take that next step. The projects can request up to 150,000 for economic costs. AHRC will fund 80% of the FEC, and eligible costs related to international co-leads will be paid at 100% FEC. And the maximum duration that can be applied for is 5 years. And this gives teams a space to build partnerships, test ideas, and deliver meaningful impact at a realistic pace. And it also brings the proof of concept opportunity in line with our other applicant-led mode opportunities. So moving on to individual eligibility. Firstly, project leads must be based at a UK research organisation to be eligible for this AHRC funding. All information can be found on the Funding Finder page for AHRC Proof of Concept. Second, project leads must have a clear connection to the underpinning research. There are 3 routes that someone can take to be eligible. They must either be the original project lead of the research that the new application builds upon, a member of the original research team, and in this instance, it's more appropriate for you to lead on the proposed activity. This gives flexibility where expertise, continuity, and practical delivery sits elsewhere within the team. Or a researcher working an eligible organisation who wishes to take forward a piece of research where the original project lead is no longer available to do so. This ensures that valuable research outputs are not left without a pathway to impact simply because circumstances changed. So project eligibility. This opportunity is designed to build on research that has already received a direct investment from AHRC or UKRI, ensuring strong existing work has a clear pathway to real-world impact. To be eligible, applications must build on an existing project that meets one or more of the following criteria. A project has been directly funded by AHRC, either currently or previously. This includes any research grant funded by AHRC, but does not include master's, doctoral or collaborative doctoral studentships. The project may build on work that has been supported through an AHRC Impact Acceleration account. Highlighted in the POF evaluation, we know that these awards often generate promising early stage ideas, and this opportunity is designed to help take those further. The project may be directly co-funded or fully funded by another UK Research Council or wider UKRI opportunity. The original research doesn't need to fall within AHRC's remit. What matters is that your proposed proof of concept activity clearly does. Where that's the case, applicants will need to provide a strong justification, supporting evidence to demonstrate the arts and humanities focus. If you are in doubt, you can check if your project outline fits within AHRC's remit by using our remit query form on our website. In essence, if your work has been directly funded through AHRC or UKRI and your proposed activity is firmly grounded within arts and humanities, you can be eligible for proof of concept support. So moving on to other key core team roles. Alongside the project lead, this opportunity supports a range of other core roles that help deliver high quality translation and impact activity. These include a UK-based project co-leads, international project co-leads, specialists, professional enabling staff, research and innovation associates, and technicians. These roles ensure teams have the right mix of expertise, whether that's technical skills, commercial insight, partnership development, or delivery support. What this opportunity does not support is project studentships. This means that we cannot fund any doctoral study of any kind. Overall, the focus is on supporting skilled teams who can drive translation and real-world impact, not funding new doctoral training. So what we will fund, on this slide, I have outlined what we will fund through this opportunity. Firstly, everything you include in your application needs to be clearly justified and aligned with your project aims. That's really important. As mentioned at the very beginning, this is an applicant-led opportunity. Therefore, we are giving you the flexibility, but we expect you to show why each activity is necessary. We're encouraging applicants to define what is needed to shape their own approach and approach to achieving impact. There is no single model here. Different projects will follow different pathways, and we really wanted to make sure that was clear. In terms of what we can support, that includes a wide range of activities, including to, but absolutely not limited to, anything that strengthens the development or delivery of impact, public engagement, knowledge exchange, skills development, and as long as those activities lead to clearly defined outcomes. What we will also fund different routes to impact. That might include licensing, spin-out, social venture, commercialisation work, activities designed to influence policy or broader public engagement. We recognise that the arts and humanities research reaches the world in many different ways, and we want to support that variety. We can also support costs that build capacity and skills for commercialisation or impact delivery, as well as costs that enable meaningful impact engagement with non-academic audiences. For example, working with businesses, the third sector, heritage organisations, community groups, and so on. But there is one absolute critical point that we do want to emphasise. You must be able to show a clear pathway from your planned activities to real-world impact. If the pathway is vague, unclear, or missing, then the application simply will not be competitive. Every applicant must include a visual logic model within the approach section, and this is mandatory. The logic model should show at a glance how the project's activities lead to outputs and the real-world outcomes. It needs to be an impact pathway easy for assessors to follow. The core message here is to define what you need, to justify it, and to show us a line of sight to impact. And that moves us on to what we won't fund. So firstly, we cannot support projects that sit primarily outside of AHRC's remit. Your proposed activities must clearly be rooted in arts and humanities research. If your focus falls elsewhere, it will not be eligible. We also do not fund grant extensions and simple continuations of existing work. This opportunity is about creating pathways to impact and not about keeping previous projects running. Similarly, we do not fund further research or development extensions of existing resources or websites. If the primary purpose is to build on bigger data sets, extend a platform, or carry out new research, this is just not the right funding route for that. We also cannot support activities linked to research lead or opportunities where primary cost is staffing. This isn't a staffing or salary opportunity, it's about enabling impact. And finally, we do not fund academic outputs such as journal articles, academic conferences, or academic publications. Though we do see those outputs as valuable, but they don't represent the kind of real-world impact that this opportunity is designed to deliver. In short, this opportunity is about translation, engagement, impact, and not about further academic research or traditional academic outputs. And then on to reporting requirements. We also wanted to share a quick note on reporting requirements for this opportunity. As with all AHRC awards, you will need to complete standard reporting, such as research fish, and this remains unchanged. However, AHRC may also introduce additional bespoke reporting conditions for some projects. These are designed to support things like the development of impact studies and the creation of strategic outputs that help us to demonstrate the value of this work. I want to reassure you that any additional requirement will be proportionate and they will be tailored to the size and nature of your project. This is not about adding an unnecessary burden, it's about capturing impact in a meaningful way. The overall aim here is to enhance visibility, transferability, and long-term value of the work that we're funding so that the benefits of your project continue well beyond the life of the award. And finally, I just wanted to highlight again the importance of the application process and the logic model requirement. For this opportunity, all applicants, as mentioned before, must include a visual logic model within the approach section of the application. This isn't an optional extra, it is a core requirement. The logic model should clearly show a pathway from your proposed activities to the outputs and ultimately to the real world impact outcomes that you expect to deliver. In other words, it needs to make your impact story visible and easy to understand. We're not prescribing a format. You have the flexibility to choose the structure that works best for your project. The key is clarity, and your logic model shouldn't be overloaded with text or use repeats or or used to repeat the narrative of your application. Assessors should be able to scan it easily, understand your pathway at a glance, and feel confident that your activities lead logically to the outcomes that you've identified. The logic model should be included as an embedded image directly within the approach section. It cannot be uploaded as a separate attachment. And most importantly, if your logic model is missing, your application may be considered incomplete. So the key message is to take the time to design a clear, coherent logic model that shows how your activities connect to meaningful impact. Is a critical part of making a strong and competitive and compliant application. So while my colleagues set up in the background, and hopefully while you're submitting any questions for the Q&A, we just wanted to take a moment to share some short impact stories. These were created from the fantastic case studies that were submitted as part of the FOF evaluation. They highlight the breadth and quality of the work across the FOF opportunity in the 10 years that we looked back. And if you haven't done already, we do urge you to read the report from the evaluation that is still published on our website alongside these stories. So I will end the slideshow and hand over to Victoria for the Q&A.
Thank you, Paris. I would like to introduce today's panel. So we have Jaideep Gupte, Ruth Livesey, Leo Springate, and Paris Seager. Our first question for the panel is, FOF mainly focused on AHRC funded research. Why is eligibility so broad now for this scheme when success rates are so poor?
I'm really happy to pick that one up to start with, and I think actually as well it's a question that I would just gently push back on the sort of the premise of the question actually. So I really don't think in terms of the eligibility that it's that much of an evolution from FOF. There has always been that element of recognizing that fantastic projects that we might wish to fund in an arts and humanities context might come from funded projects where we've worked with other funding councils or come from an idea that has been spawned in a different kind of UKRI funding context and then being refracted through the lens of some arts and humanities research and kind of brought to us here. So we're actually quite kind of content that it's a similar kind of portfolio of potential applicants that we're looking at. Obviously, we've got the addition of the AHRC Impact Accelerator accounts, which we're really excited about, and was one of the kind of one of the things in the original kind of report that we commissioned on follow-on funding that really emphasised that would be I suppose to use a word of the moment, a really nice translational pathway to kind of go from those kind of smaller awards into something more scalable. So we're really excited to see how that goes. And I think, as always with these things, eligibility is a balance between sourcing the best possible ideas, but also making sure that you don't have an unlimited pool. So we did think about, when we were commissioning the scheme, we did think about ways that we could run this that would require, that were totally open, would have had no kind of follow-on kind of component. And I think where we really landed on this is that actually we know that, after doing however many years of an individual project, you end up in such a wonderful place with partners, with the kind of thinking that you've done, that we really didn't want that to go to waste. So we kind of chose to maintain that follow-on element and then to build all the additional elements around it as well. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that before we move on, but if not, the next question.
Thank you, Leo. If a researcher has already held a FOF award, would they be eligible to apply for an AHRC Proof of Concept scheme?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. And yes, there's nothing to stop an applicant who's previously held a FOF award or any eligible award to apply for a proof of concept. Proof of concept application should be around new activities, and that is for all previous awards that you're building upon. It shouldn't be duplicating what's already been funded or applied for.
Thank you, Paris. Okay, the next question has two parts. Firstly, how do you define or consider commercialisation? And secondly, how will you assess the outcomes delivery, e.g. commercialisation?
Happy to take a start at that, though Ruth, Leo, Paris do jump in as well. So really important question around how we're defining commercialization. Ruth and I and Leo have given you a flavor of this at the start as well. So I think it's really important to refer to UKRI's definition of commercialization. So this describes the process by which new improved technologies, products, processes, services generated through research are brought to market. In the case of AHRC, we're also explicitly including experiences. We've added the word experiences because in the arts and humanities, the outputs of research can include cultural, creative experiences for sure. And, to recognize that these can absolutely be legitimate commercial outcomes. More broadly, though, commercialization is really about intent and progression. So taking an idea that addresses a real need, developing it, refining it, moving it along a pathway, much as Ruth described earlier, that could ultimately lead to it being used, adopted, or sold in a marketplace. And just to emphasize something I mentioned earlier, commercialization is one pathway among several. Policy influence, social ventures, cultural practice, public engagement, these are all equally valid routes to impact. And just, I was reading the Q&A, there was a suggestion to build a sort of repository of successful proof of concept work as the scheme establishes itself. I think that's a really good and interesting suggestion. We'll have a think about how that can be done. Certainly blogs are a great way for us to convey that high impact work. Ruth, Leah, did you want to come in on that or the second part of that question as well?
I think I just wanted to reiterate what you'd said, Jaideep, that often the new word is the one people take away, which for us would be the commercialization piece. And I want us to be, willing to open the door to think about what that means in that very inclusive way you've demonstrated there, Jaideep, because there is a value to this, but it's only one of what we were very clear as a review panel. We wanted to keep the breadth and to keep storytelling about how powerful the many routes to different kinds of impact one can have through the arts and humanities. But from the applicant point of view, I think that logic model, it's quite a brain shift for many of us as PIs, but it's a very helpful one because we're moving from what are we asking to go into this project, this scheme in our application, and what do we anticipate the outcome of that to be for the end users and communities. And that's a bit of a pivot from something that's often been much more vision driven now, and hopefully that will help clarify our design, the design of application.
Thank you. Okay. Next question, translation versus further research. How should applicants most clearly evidence that their project is translational rather than extending exploratory research, particularly where evaluation at scale is required to demonstrate real-world readiness?
So I'm happy to take an initial start of that. I think it's, for us, one of the things we really focused on when we kind of got the follow-on funding report and we're thinking about this was the tangibility of output. And I think that's the kind of, and I think as Ruth kind of alluded to in the answer to the previous question, that is the end point for us. So I think starting at the end is a really useful way to think about this. It is what is the effective thing that we're going to do, which I think once you start to think about tangibility, you start to think about audience, you start to think about the kind of the real world impact that something is going to have. And I think if you are thinking those things, you're going to be able to sort of evidence those kind of cases. I think where you don't kind of take that thought process, I think it becomes much harder to kind of do that translational piece well. I think, as Ruth said as well, that requirement for the logic model is I hope what we want to do is kind of create the conditions for people to work that through and to kind of recognize that that is potentially a bit of an evolution. And I think another kind of point here is just thinking about the assessment kind of context. So, you know, panels get all the same information that you do, and they're aware of the kind of the financial load and the kind of the amount that you can kind of apply for. So there is a real kind of pragmatism to going, okay, well, what is the proportionate approach to the aims, to the funded amount, and to kind of bring those things together to kind of come up with a coherent funding application, but also a decision on the ability that you've shown to tension all of those things. Jaideep or Ruth, I don't know if you want to come in on that anymore.
Sorry, Leo, I was trying to find my unmute button. You've covered that really well. Just wanted to underscore that, Leo, sort of picking up from the point you made around assessment. So all proposals are assessed against that full set of criteria outlined in the opportunity, in the guidance. And that sort of applies regardless of the pathway being pursued. So the bit I wanted to highlight was that, the route to impact, whether the route to impact is commercialization, licensing, spin out, social venture, in the policy space, whether it's in public engagement, the sense is that assessors will be looking for the same thing, right? A credible, well thought out pathway that leads to tangible real world outcomes. I think that's the simplest way to put it. And Ruth, your point on logic models, I think really establishes that. So, an encouragement here for everyone to just come back to those kind of really simple ways of establishing that credible, thought through pathway.
And I might just jump in because I saw it coming on a comment. It's quite easy to find good logic models out there. You just do a bit of a Google search, you will come back with some examples, and you can start forming your own opinions. It's a new genre for us often, but most people in the humanities and arts are good at learning genres and how to do well at them. So just do a little bit of work on that, perhaps. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Next question we have. It's very welcome to see the eligibility criteria expanded to include IAA funding project recipients. Is there a minimum amount of IAA funding that an applicant needs to have been awarded to be eligible to apply for the Proof of Concept Fund?
Sorry, I was just trying to find my unmute button. No, there is not a minimum amount for IAs or any previous award required for applicants to apply, eligible to apply for the Proof of Concept funding opportunity. Any project that has received IAA funding, regardless of the size of the award, can be used on the basis of a Proof of Concept application, provided that the proposal clearly builds on the prior work and meets the rest of the scheme's eligibility and assessment criteria. If that answers that.
Thank you. Would you recommend we stagger applications to this call, i.e. to internally manage competition between proposals from the same HEI?
I think I'm happy to answer that one. That's a really good question. And it's something that we've thought about, not just in the context of this opportunity, but across our entire applicant-led portfolio. So I think about a year ago now, and I think it was Paris, we published a blog about our Curiosity and Catalyst schemes, who are kind of coming up to about their sort of second birthday now. And I think one of the things that we looked at for submitting our organisations is, was there any difference between people who submit a huge amount of proposals, in kind of blocks, to sort of spread bets as an approach, versus those that kind of submitted fewer or more of a kind of tail. There wasn't really any benefit to turning on the hose. And so I think that tells us something, and I think there's some contextual factors that I think it's worth bearing in mind with this scheme. So there's no organizational cap, so you can absolutely do what you need to do for your organization. But I think we all have a kind of a collective responsibility to manage demand for funding. One of the things that we can do, which was kind of harder for us, I think, as a community with Curiosity and Catalyst, is that when they opened with deadlines. And we all get deadline fever, and it's really tempting. You think, oh, we'll just put it in for that one. This scheme is always open. There are no deadlines. You can apply at absolutely any time. So if you are, as an organisation, weighing up, oh, do we put this one in now or later, etc., you have that flexibility to be able to do that. And so we're really hoping that that means people will have the flexibility to only apply when they're ready. And I think that hopefully is kind of a real benefit, that you get to have the conditions, create the conditions to apply with the very best version of that application.
Thank you. I can see the UKRI commercialisation policy informs the scheme. My question is, if the reviewers will continue to review from their perspective of their AHRC disciplines, or will they have some way of assessing those commercialisation aspects? Will there be industry reviewers? The reason I ask, because it would change how you write the application for different readers.
So I think that's a really fair point. So all assessment is about bringing some form of expertise to bear within the context of the aims of the funding opportunity. So what we will be asking are, so if there's a question about, well, what will the assessors be doing and what will they be thinking, it's always worth going back to the aims of the scheme and the sort of what will assessors be looking for, questions within the actual application form. Because really what we will ask them to do is to bring to life their expertise in the kind of context of that framework. I think the second point I'd make on this, and it's another one that kind of was really brought out for us through the follow-on funding report, was for the need to kind of diversify the base of collection of people that are assessing for us, to bring in those kind of commercialisation expertise, but a whole range of expertise that really speak to the aims of the call. One of the things we have done for this scheme is change the assessment approach. So we used to ask for written peer review. We're now going sort of straight to assessment panels. And so one of the kind of key undertakings we will have is to make sure that those assessment panels are kind of staffed with the right kind of collection of people to assess applications. We have a fantastic peer review college who really speak to the broad sweep of skills and expertise you would need to assess for a scheme of this type, but we also know that it's a constant evolution with kind of colleges and assessment. So we will be looking at ways that we can bring more industry expertise onto the panel, and also think about ways that we can get even more industry expertise within the kind of college as well. So they will be able to speak to that industry kind of context. There will be a kind of a panel of experts. But I think the key steer here is to really think about the project aims, because that's the sort of the shared language, if you like, between assessment and application that kind of bring us all together.
Thank you. UKRI announced another call named Proof of Concept, which is cross-council and with a much tighter deadline. How are the two distinct from each other, and would unsuccessful proposals from the UKRI-wide call be reconsidered in this call if they met the eligibility criteria for both?
So I'm happy to again kick off on that one, as I'm already unmuted. I think it's really exciting to have such a broad base and different kind of options within the context of thinking about UKRI commercialisation strategy and kind of the translation of research. So I think it's really important, if you're just thinking about this as a landscape, to think about them as really kind of complementary of each other. The UKRI one is broader, so it encompasses all of UKRI's remit. That broadness is fantastic. It allows us to kind of, to source as UKRI the best ideas from everywhere across all disciplinary remits, kind of gives a really clear steer that that's something that we want to see. Sometimes the challenges of when you're painting with a broad brush is that you potentially have, you have a concern around nuance and the ability to kind of reflect the challenges that individual remit or disciplinary areas might have kind of engaging with something. And actually that's, I think, where our scheme kind of comes in as a kind of a companion piece. They kind of complement each other really well. We've hopefully been able to take account of the needs and context of what really good arts and humanities research looks like. Specifically, we're able to particularly focus on that as an assessment criteria, but also in the way that the assessment gets done. And I think there's also some practical things that's just worth bearing in mind. So the UKRI one has a deadline. Ours is always open. Theirs is for a much shorter funding window. So I think off the top of my head, it's up to 9 months, whereas we've given the flexibility of up to 5. And so what I think, if I was advising someone on what to do here, I would open up both Funding Finder texts and just have a really good read and think, okay, what is the best thing for me to do here? As far as I'm aware, standard resubmission policy will apply. So if you went for the UKRI one and were unsuccessful, we wouldn't allow that to come back as one for R1 unless you substantively changed the scheme, the application in some way.
Thank you very much. Just like to thank everybody for sending in their questions today. I note we are about to run out of time, so I will now pass on to Leo to close.
Thanks, Victoria. So I think we've just got a slide coming back up for us, which I'll just wait for because I'm going to talk to you about it. Lovely. So a question we always get asked in these webinars is, are the slides and recordings going to be available at the end? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Just keep checking back in our Funding Finder page for this opportunity and they'll be there. Sometimes you have a question that doesn't lend itself to a webinar format. It might be particularly complex, or it might have some very specific kind of queries for your area. So if you want to contact us at enquiries@ahrc.ukri.org, that's one way you can kind of get in touch on those specifics. If you're having any trouble with systems, then there's obviously the contact for the funding service there. And I think I've seen a few questions throughout today about some of the kind of the context and sort of background reading that you might want to do as if you're thinking about an application. So I'd heartily recommend Paris's recent blog to you on this, which is linked there and you should be able to find on our website. The other thing that blog does and has within it is a link to the follow-on funding report that we published, and that was the kind of the starting point for this piece of work. So you should find a link there that allows you to go and read this. There's obviously the funding opportunity guidance. We really hope that you'll apply, and that can be found on the UKRI Funding Finder. And there's also the UKRI nomenclature information as well. I think that's everything from us. So just a huge thank you for everyone that's attended today. Looking forward to publishing this in due course, and also incredibly excited to see what everyone comes up with their applications. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much.